Hey guys, it's 4:45 in the morning, and I thought now would be a great time to unleash my first Facebook post or video or whatever. For everybody who knows me, I don't really post too much. I guess this is probably part of the reason why. But I wanted to do a video on obsessive compulsive disorder, and you guys, a lot of you may know that I struggle pretty significantly with it, and a bunch of you may not know that I do at all. It is something that has been ever present in my life for now for almost as long as I can remember, but it really flared up over the last 4 or 5 years. And more specifically the last 3 years, very terrible. But I wanted to talk about it because there's not a lot of quality videos out there, and I'm hoping that you guys repost this, but there's not a lot of quality videos that talk about um, the true essence of OCD and the many forms of it. There's a lot out there that talk about contamination and ordering, and you guys probably know that, all about germaphobes and washing their hands. And I don't mean to mitigate that at all. That is a very severe, very challenging form of OCD. By the way, I'm sick, so if I sound bizarre, that's probably why. Um, but not to, deteriorate from the severity of contamination. But what most of you guys don't know is that there are tons of other forms out there that are equally um, abusive to our minds and to our bodies. And I want to get into a bunch of things that you guys may never heard before. Intrusive thoughts. There's a lot of different types of those. Checking, body dysmorphic disorder, perfectionism. The list kind of goes on and on. I'm going to give you guys some examples without naming names because I think stories are the best ways that we learn. It's probably the easiest way for me to get the points across. So, obsessive compulsive disorder is broken down into two sections: obsessive and compulsive. The obsessions are the negative feelings. Oh my God, I just did something wrong, or oh my God, I just got contaminated, or oh my God, if I don't, somebody's gonna die, or something terrible is weighing in on your mind and it just won't leave. And the compulsion is something that you do to neutralize that feeling. So it's a ritual, be it mental or physical. So a lot of you guys might not even know that people perform, who have OCD perform mental rituals all the time, and you might never know. They might be having a conversation with you, and in their head, repeating a word or a phrase or a number or counting over and over and over again. We're very good at hiding it. Um, I've become increasingly less good at hiding it. But in any case, mental rituals um, uh, can just be excruciatingly painful and agonizing and take up a large, large part of your time. Over the past, few years, um, there have been large amounts of times where I've been in the bathroom praying or repeating words or something over and over again for the time of up to 6 or 7 hours. And so basically, you have your obsession. It could be anything. Mom's gonna die. I just sold so and so's soul. Um, these terrible things, and then you have your compulsion, which is your ritual. I have a pencil here. I can get attacked by OCD in a billion different ways. So if I put it down the wrong way, I might have a bad thought while I put it down. Mom's gonna die in a car crash. So now I have to put it down over and over again until I don't get that thought. And it is so hard because your subconscious mind works so much quicker than your conscious mind, and it just keeps coming. That thought of mom dying in a car crash just keeps coming and keeps coming. And to you, this is truly real. This is going to happen, and we do this compulsion until we get what is called is the just right feeling. So the just right feeling is I did it just right that mom's not going to die in a car crash. Unfortunately, these rituals perpetuate the whole cyclical uh, nonsense, which is OCD. And I do say nonsense because we all who have OCD know that it's not rational thought. How can the way that I put a pencil down affect my mother's life? The sad part is that our emotional brain very clearly outweighs our rational brain. So I like to say 1% is greater than 99%. The 1% chance of something happening is going to propel us into action to ritualize way more than the 99% chance that it's not going to happen. And our emotional brain always outweighs our rational brain. And the problem is that we just can't get it out of our head. Um, so that's like kind of called just having to do something just right. I'm kind of like looking at notes as I go because I don't want to really miss anything. Um, I'm gonna talk about my OCD first because that's the easiest thing that there is for me to kind of relate to. I have intrusive thoughts, and intrusive thoughts are just miserable. They're thoughts that come into your mind, and they're you don't want them to be there. You don't want to think them, but when they do, they will not leave, and you feel the need to fix and fix and fix it and fix it. And so with me, I have two major ones, and OCD usually hits the thing that you care about the most in the world. So for me, it's going to be my loved ones, my family, and my religion, and it has impacted those very severely. And so the examples that I can give are first, I feel like I can cause death to the people that I love with arbitrary things, the way I breathe, the way I step on something, the way I turn my car keys, the way I put in my seatbelt, the way I take out a cigarette, the way I throw out a cigarette, anything. If I have a bad thought while I do one of those things, then I have to fix it. Um, and it's horrible. Um, if that's not bad enough, I feel like I could damn the souls of the people that I love. I often sell them for uh, for things. So if I was thirsty, my head would say, "Would you sell somebody's soul for a glass of water?" And immediately, yes. Um, and then I can't get over the fact that I said yes, and it's not. It hasn't been uncommon for me to go the entire day with in my head. I would never do that. I would never do that. I would never do that. Um, and OCD is pretty much a three-prong attack. The first prong is fear that you did something. The second prong is sadness that there's going to be this huge consequence. And the third prong is guilt. And not just guilt that you let something terrible happen or you created something terrible, but the worst part about the guilt is in order to fight OCD, you can't rationalize with it. Rationalization just won't work. A lot of you might be out there saying, well, you can't damn somebody's soul. You don't own them, or you can't cause death of your mom by buckling your seatbelt the wrong way. Um, and rationally, I know that, but my brain will always go back to the point of origin of panic. So whereas most people's brains, it'll come in, and you guys, everyone has intrusive thoughts. Have you, especially somebody living in New York City is a good example. Have you ever had the thought of pushing somebody onto subway tracks? I think probably everybody has, but most people just laugh it off and just carry about their business because they have a filter in their brain. They have a little gatekeeper that's like, that's effing stupid, but bye. With people with OCD, they don't have that gatekeeper, and when they try to say that's stupid, it just goes back to, well, what does that mean about you? Why did you want to push him? Did you really want to push him? I can't believe you wanted to push him. I do it over and over for hours and hours, and we don't have that gatekeeper that filters out unnecessary information and unnecessary thinking. So with me, no matter how much I try to tell myself, or no matter how much somebody tells me that I'm not capable of damning anybody, um, if I subscribe to that method of kind of talk therapy and trying to really rationalize it out, I'm always going to look for that reassurance. So I'm always going to go back and say, like if somebody said to me, "You're incapable of doing that," maybe at first I might be like, "Oh, thank God. Thank God I'm not capable of that." Um, but 5 minutes later, I'll be like, "Oh my God, what if I'm capable of it? What if I'm capable of it?" and it'll keep getting worse and worse, and it actually feeds it. I'll actually need that reassurance every single time I have that thought, and and you get stuck in this never-ending loop, and it's traumatizing and it's paralyzing, and you end up, smashing things and crying and laughing, and it's brutal is the understatement of the century on this one, because when I get back to the statement of guilt, to beat OCD, you have to there's a therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure and response prevention, and it's called ERP for short. You expose yourself to the things that you fear the most in the world. So you expose yourself purposefully to, a good exposure for me would be to have a negative thought that when I do, let's say I do trigger myself, and when I put this pencil down, my mom is going to die in a car accident. Well, now I'm exposed to this horrific thought, and all I want to do is put the pencil down correctly, and I'll do it over and over again until I get correct. But with ERP, the RP is the response prevention. So you expose yourself to this terrible thing, and then you don't respond to it. And as you don't respond to it, and as you don't redo the action and do the ritual, whatever it may be, your head is going to bark louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and louder with more conviction over and over again. Mom's going to die. Mom's going to die. Mom's going to die. You're going to let mom die. You're going to let mom die. Mom's going to die in a car accident. Like, for hours. Okay? Just for hours. And the guilt of not fixing something when your mother's life is on the line, or your, brother's soul is on the line, or it's hard for me to vocalize these things sometimes because I get very triggered by it. But the guilt of walking away from those things is terrible, because it's like you're putting yourself and your recovery ahead of something that could be permanently, you could have caused the worst thing to ever happen. And that's how you beat OCD, is that you continuously let it do its worst and you don't respond to it. But it's not as easy as just like, okay, well, I'm not going to respond to it, or I'm going to walk away and do my thing. Well, no. You're going to have that voice inside of your ear. You're going to have visions of your mom being killed. You're going to have vision, everything. You're going to sweat. It's like an itch times 10,000 billion% to take care of. And you just can't. And you have to let it go. And you have to let it run its course, and let the anxiety and the fear and the sadness and the guilt run its course. And that course may be an hour long, or it could be a week long. In my worst case, I remember I said the word soul for 3 days straight without sleeping. And every time I did, I felt like I damned the person that I love the most in this world. And I was clearly doing the wrong thing at that time by playing and giving into it and trying to get the just right feeling of saying the word just right. But when I don't give in, it could last just this long. And somehow you have to carry about your day, and you have to continue living, even though you feel like you're the worst person on earth, and you just caused the worst things, and you're not doing it. Think about like walking past your loved one on a cliff, and that's what we do, because as much little rational sense as it makes, I could give you this as an example. As clear as you see my shirt being red or salmon colored, or whatever my shirt is. So it may not be that clear, but as clear as you see this being my hand, that's how clear we see these bad things happening. And again, I'm not going to mention any names, but I want to give an example. There was a guy in my recovery group, in my support group, who was afraid that he was naked, and he would sit there and he would say, "Am I naked? oh my God, am I naked? And then he would look down and he would see that he had clothes on. Um, so clearly he wasn't naked, and he would look back up, and that signal in his brain would again tell him that he was naked. So even though he just saw that he was wearing clothes, he'd be like, "Oh my God, am I naked?" And this was like an ongoing process. You could relate it to somebody who hits a bump in a road. Some people who have OCD, they hit a bump in a road, and they are tremendously afraid that they hit somebody. They might get out of their car and look and see that it was a speed bump, and they might go back in their car, and again they have to get back out and look, and they might have to do that 20 times. They might drive away. It might bother them the rest of the night. They might drive back to that location and see, did I hit somebody? So this is the way that our brains do not let go and get a vice grip on our fears. So through exposure and response prevention, we eventually learn not to mitigate our anxiety, because the goal is not to bring our anxiety down. Our goal is actually to learn to live with anxiety better. So instead of going down here, it's kind of weird for me because it's flip camera angle. Instead of reducing our anxiety, we're creating a tolerance for it. And eventually, the goal is habitualization. So what is it to actually like habituate to something? Um, what do I mean by that? Habituate. Okay, the best way I can explain it is that if you were to jump into a freezing cold pool, at first it would seem like, oh my God, this is so cold, this is so cold. But 25 minutes into swimming, you wouldn't even notice it. And the water didn't change, it was just your brain's perception of the water. So we're trying to change our brain's perception to these intrusive thoughts, to mom's gonna die and it's really gonna happen, to whatever our intrusive thoughts may be. And I'll get into a bunch more different types of intrusive thoughts and different types of OCD. Um, but Another example I like to give is a fun house, or not a fun house, a haunted house. If you go into a haunted house for the first time, it's really scary. Like, oh my God, there! Oh my God, there! Like, a zombie, whatever. But if you went into that same haunted house 150 times, you would know exactly what was going to happen. You're like, yeah, zombie. Yeah, guy with a knife. You got it. And that's basically what we need to train our brains to do. And it takes a very long time, and it's excruciatingly painful every single time. And it's, you just don't want to do it. You don't want to sit through hours of feeling like the worst person on earth and feeling like the world is ending. And this is what we do every single day, all day long. So I want to talk, a little bit about other types of intrusive thoughts. So, I talked a little bit about mine. There are a bunch of other really common ones. I want to say that intrusive thoughts are usually the antithesis of who you are as a person. So if you have such a strong conviction and faith in God, then it's going to attack you on a religious level. If you love your family or your spouse more than anyone, they're going to be the targets of your OCD. Um, a great example I can give is pedophilia. There are a ton of people who their OCD fear and their trigger is that they are going to be pedophiles, or that they are pedophiles, or that they want to look at children, so on and so forth. These are the last people in the world that would touch a child or look at a child inappropriately, and because of that, it's exactly what their OCD attacks. So for me to give an example about ERP for somebody, say, with pedophilia, um, normally somebody with pedophilia, they would avoid children. So they would avoid their nieces and nephews and cousins and children, and they wouldn't want to be around them. People have a huge struggle when their parents of like changing diapers and stuff like that. Did I look at, them in a cross way, or did I touch them? Oh my God, did I touch them? Do I want to touch them? And again, it is complete opposite of who they are, but they will not get over it in their brain. And so, an exposure for them may be to actually look at pictures of children all day long, and eventually look at children in bathing suits or something like that, and you kind of like get to your you kind of zero in on your main fear, and eventually maybe you're changing babies' diapers and you're doing stuff like that, and hopefully you habitualize to the point where um, you can make it through those scenarios. Um, Another types of intrusive thoughts, they come in harm. It's called harm thoughts. So you have two types of harm thoughts: harm by intent and harm by neglect. Um, Intent would be somebody who, for example, would look at their mom while they're holding a kitchen knife, and immediately a thought would come into their mind about plunging the knife into their mother's eye. Um, they can't get over the fact that they had the thought. Um, that would be harm by intent. It would be, oh my God, do I really want to plunge a knife into my mom's eye? And you know, they'll ruminate and try to talk themselves out of it for hours, and just feel like the worst person on the planet, when in reality they love their mom more than anybody probably. Um, and then you have harm by neglect, and harm by neglect is oh, did I leave the stove on? I might have left the stove on. I should have taken care of that. Billy's gonna burn down. Or I didn't check this securely enough. It ties in very closely to checking. A lot of people check the stoves over and over again. They check the locks on their doors. And A lot of people go around with checklists, and they check off, yes, I checked the door, and they'll still go back to check because there's not enough information for them. Maybe a burglar will get in, maybe the house will burn down, something like that. That kind of connects really strongly to hyper responsibility. Hyper responsibility is, and this is also a very sad one, people who believe that they're responsible for everything. It's what the name implies. So if there's a stone in the road, they have to kick it out because somebody may pop their tire on it, and that would be their fault if it happened. A kid might trip and fall in the road. If there's a penny, it could be any ridiculous scenario. A penny in the road might get stuck in a tire, which causes it to pop, which causes it to hit a kid on a bicycle, and now all of a sudden that's their fault. And so they literally, anything their mind can come up with that in a way that a scenario could be their fault, they go around, they have to take care of everything. A spill on the floor is a nightmare for them because they'll go and they'll clean it up, and then they'll go back and check it and make sure that they clean it up right. It's just so difficult. And then you have people who are afraid that they did things to other people. So one of my better friends at the I don't know if I said this already, but I was in a hospital for 3 months this year. I was in a psychiatric hospital, and I met a lot of people with severe OCD, and I'll say that I have severe OCD, and it has impacted my life. It is the greatest challenge of my life, like without a doubt. But I was probably middle of the road in severity everyone who was at this institution had severe OCD, but I was probably middle of the road, and it is really heartbreaking. There was a guy there who was a good buddy of mine, and anything that his mind could create where he could possibly harm somebody. So like, oh, did I poison your water? Did I put a tack in your coffee? Did I rip some circuits out of your car? Of course, he never did any of those things. And as a friend, you want to tell him, like, of course you didn't. Just as the way that, my friends want to tell me, of course you're not responsible for these things. God's only responsible for these things, protecting people, you know, all these things. And this guy got to the point where, I had to talk him down at one point from swallowing a tack because he wanted to see if he could survive it. Because he was so guilty that he might have put a tack in somebody's coffee. And this is how he lives every single day of his life. And and it's torment. It, it's complete torment. Um, other forms of OCD are people who are afraid of being gay or bisexual. Um, Not that there ever has been or ever will be something wrong with being gay or bisexual, but I think it's the uncertainty that really gets at them, or they just really whatever want to be straight or something. But imagine not knowing and the fear of what am I over and over again every day of your life. Um, there's a form called scrupulosity, and scrupulosity is blasphemous thoughts about God. I struggle with this. Um, I love God. Uh, I believe He is the most instrumental thing in my recovery. Um, but if I were to walk into a church, if I'm gonna be honest, I would see a bunch of imagery that would trigger me. If I saw Mary, like my head would immediately picture her naked or something like that, and because it's the opposite of what I want to think. Um, I would think just terrible thoughts, and I think you know I think that's one of the biggest struggles for me to deal with. I'm sorry. Sometimes thinking about it, I get a little lost in it. There's another type of OCD called emotional contamination, which probably nobody knows. Well, not a lot of people know about on here. Emotional contamination is something where I think a good example would be you would think that you could take on the characteristics of somebody. So let's say there's somebody you absolutely despised who walked through a doorway. Um, you would think that if you walk through that doorway that you could pick up their traits. So let's take Hitler for example. If you drank from Hitler's coffee cup, you would become like him. That's a good example of emotional contamination. So imagine like the rerouting people do and not wanting to touch people. A lot of times there are people who, you talk about OCD and you talk about, oh, there's a lot of hand washing going on. Some people wash their hands because they feel they've contaminated their hands emotionally. So they feel like they have bad energy on their hands and they need to get rid of it. It's not germs, it's bad energy, and they don't want to spread it to other people. They don't want to spread it to their children. They don't want to spread it to their friends or innocent bystanders or something like that. So they wash their hands, and they can equally get their hands to turn, a different color from scrubbing so much, washing their hands 100 times a day to get rid of that feeling. Um, I want to talk a little bit. The reason why I'm doing this video, I know I touched on it earlier, but is because pop culture talks so much of it's nobody's fault that people say, oh, I'm OCD about this, I'm OCD about that. Um, I don't blame anybody for doing that. There's a lot of blogs out there that are like, OCD is when you tie your shoelaces 3 times to be lucky, or when you turn you set your alarm 3 times to make sure it's on, or something like that. And it's like, no, it's not OCD. But I don't get mad at people. They're not informed, and that's what I'm trying to hopefully do here is spread a little bit of information, because I honestly think this is one of the most brutal mental illnesses somebody can deal with. Because if I'm going to be 100% honest, I can count on one hand, probably 4 fingers, the amount of hours I've had of peace of mind in the last 3 years. So my mind has been free from these thoughts maybe a total of 4 hours in 3 years. And every other bit when you've seen me and you've spoken to me, I was having some sort of internal battle or struggle, and I don't even have the most severe case by far that I know. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about pop culture's view. You see Howie Mandel, right, on America's Got Talent, and you see the movie As Good as It Gets, and a lot of people, toss the term so freely around, and even when it is kind of looked at as legitimate OCD, You'll see Howie Mandel. He'll run down the stage like this because he doesn't want anybody to touch him. Um, he doesn't want to get any germs on him, and everybody laughs, and even some of the acts they take like shots at him, try to get him dirty and stuff, and Howard Stern will laugh at it, or somebody will laugh at it, and make a joke over it. What the cameras don't show is the things like when he is isolated from his children, and he's afraid that either he'll contaminate them or they'll contaminate him, and the hours he spends away from his family. What the cameras don't show is the hundreds of thousands of times he's probably washed his hands. What the cameras don't show is how he has to open doors with his feet and stuff. And what the cameras don't show is, when he's in a back room crying or going crazy or smashing things, because that's what eventually we all end up doing, because it does get very often to that point. Um, and I think in a way, making a joke out of it and smiling and everything, being a good sport about it that he is good, and I know he does a lot for OCD awareness and telling the true story behind OCD and stuff. But I think in a way it diminishes the severity of what it is, and I think more people need to know exactly what it is, and exactly how many different ways it can manifest itself in somebody, and I think that it'd be great if people didn't throw the term around so loosely, and like I said, we're all guilty of it. I've said many times to somebody, "You're insane. You're insane." Um, for people who are legally insane, it's extremely sad, an extremely challenging life for both them and their family. So, of course, I don't get mad at people who say I'm so OCD about this. Of course, I'm so OCD about that. But I think what the important thing is that like we start to get information out there so that people better understand it, because it is so hard to live with. Um, so I know this has been an epically long video. Um, Maybe someday I'll post on some of the other things that I need to touch on: body dysmorphic disorder, perfectionism. There's just so much. This has been a half-hour video, and for anybody who watched, some of it or the majority of it or all of it, I thank you so much. I ask that you repost this so that people kind of start to see what it's truly like, and again, like I can't thank you guys enough for watching this. Um, it is now 5:21 in the morning, and I should probably try to go to sleep. All right, thanks, guys, and I will, post this, my first Facebook thing ever, epically long. All right, thanks, guys.